Elaine Foster, 73, the woman who brought a lemon cake to my son's backyard and learned, between the grill smoke and a wind chime, that I was apparently past my expiration date. "Why is she even still alive?" someone hissed. My daughter-in-law, Lydia, while my son, Mark, didn't correct her. I stood under their maple tree with a paper plate and a plastic fork and felt something tilt inside my ribs. Not a break, but the sound of a lock clicking shut. The music was cheerful, the kind you play when neighbors wander through open gates, but I heard only the thud of my own pulse. Mark waved without meeting my eyes. Lydia rearranged napkins like the hostess of a new life, where I was an old photograph turned to the wall. I could have set the cake down and fled. I had done that kind of disappearing before. Today I didn't. I carried the cake forward and laid it beside the sparkling drinks, steady as a hand putting down a card that changes the game. I spoke to the grandchildren first. Children know when a room is colder than it should be. Ruby looked up at me like a candle, and I warmed my hands at her light. I made myself smile, the way you hold a bridge in place while the river rages, and I asked, who wanted the first slice? There was chatter, the safe kind, paper cups, bees nosing at the frosting, small talk that dodged around me like a clever dog. No one knew that while I lifted the knife, I was also lifting a boundary I hadn't touched in years. The sentence I'd overheard kept echoing, a cruel little bell. Why is she even still alive? Here's my answer, though I didn't give it voice then. I'm alive to stop asking for a seat at tables where I am not welcome. I'm alive to set my own table and decide who gets a chair. The lemon cake disappeared quickly, which felt like a polite lie the universe told on my behalf. Lydia complimented the glaze but didn't taste it. Mark hovered near the grill, flipping chicken as if diplomacy were a marinade he could brush on until everything softened. I walked the perimeter of the yard, admiring the raised beds he'd built with my loan from 3 summers ago, the one he liked to call a gift. I had made peace with that word, or I thought I had, until today. I'm not fragile. I have a driver's license, a library card, and an organ donor sticker that tells the truth. I intend to be useful as long as there's breath in me, but usefulness is a dangerous currency in families. Once you stop paying, some people decide your account is closed. I felt that closing now. A quiet velvet rope lifted across the entrance of their lives, and I stood on the wrong side pretending I'd meant to admire the petunias all along. "Mom, you okay?" Mark asked finally, eyes still on the grill. The smoke curled into my hair. I told him the cake needed a cooler place and carried the empty pan inside. In their kitchen, the counters gleamed. The refrigerator door was a collage of school calendars and soccer schedules and one photograph of me taken 4 years ago at Thanksgiving, a little crooked, as if gravity were in on the joke. I washed the knife, dried it carefully, and set it down. My hands were steady. Anger has a tremor. Resolve does not. Through the window, Lydia's laughter landed on the patio stones and broke into bright pieces. I wasn't going to take a piece home like a party favor. I stood very still, listening for the part of myself that has always kept the books, and asked her a question. What do we owe, and to whom? When I stepped back outside, the sky had that early evening blue that makes everything look honest. I said my goodbyes with the softness people use when leaving a museum. On the sidewalk, I paused. I didn't feel old. I felt newly licensed. I went home to start counting what belonged to me, at home. I opened the file drawer where I keep warranties, tax returns, and the marriage license yellowing in its frame. Paper is a kind of memory, more honest than people. And mine had a story to tell. Years ago, after Frank died, I added Mark's name to my power of attorney. It had felt like protection then, a safety net while I was stumbling through grief. Now I looked at the crisp blue stamp and saw shackles disguised as help. Lydia's words had rubbed the polish off. I set the kettle on, brewed tea, and read through every page with a steady hand. I underlined dates, circled signatures, listened to the hiss of water against porcelain. In the quiet, I heard myself whisper, "Repair, not revenge." It sounded like instruction. If I wanted to survive with dignity, I had to repair the ground beneath me, not burn it. The next morning, I drove to the credit union. The parking lot smelled of cut grass, and I remember thinking the world was oblivious to my little rebellion. Inside, the teller smiled, slid forms across the counter, and didn't blink when I asked to revoke the power of attorney. "You'll need a notary," she said. I signed my name, slow and deliberate, as if the pen were carving a doorway into my own house. The stamp landed with a thud that felt like applause. From there, I visited Margaret, an old friend who worked probate law until retirement. We sat in her sunroom, light slanting through blinds, as she read the old will. "Outdated," she said, tapping her nails. "You left too many doors open." I nodded. Together we drafted new documents, a living trust with rules clear enough that even Lydia's sharpest knife couldn't cut through. It wasn't anger that guided my pen, but arithmetic. What's mine? What's theirs? What will never again be taken for granted? That night I cooked for myself, just one plate, one fork, and ate at the small table by the window. The silence wasn't lonely. It was instruction, reminding me I could feed myself without asking permission. Outside, the streetlight hummed like a witness who had seen many women start over after being told they were finished. 2 weeks later, I stood at the hardware store counter with a set of brass keys that gleamed like promises. The locksmith had changed the locks that morning, and I liked the sound they made sliding onto my key ring. For years, my front door had been a revolving entrance for family who came and went, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with requests. Now it was mine, alone, and that felt less like exile than freedom. I stopped at the grocery store on the way home, filling my cart with small portions. I didn't need party trays or bulk packs anymore. I chose tomatoes that would ripen on the windowsill, bread still warm from the oven, a pint of blueberries I would eat one by one without rushing. At the checkout, the clerk asked if I wanted paper or plastic. "Paper," I said, because paper lasts long enough to be folded, reused, repurposed, like me, back home. I set the bags on the counter and felt the quiet wrap around me. The house didn't feel large and empty. It felt newly claimed. I walked from room to room, touching furniture like a curator deciding what would remain in the collection. Some pieces carried history, others obligation. I could tell the difference now. I pulled a framed photo of Mark's family from the mantel and placed it in a drawer. Not destroyed, just put away until it no longer hurt. That evening, I logged onto my bank account and removed every authorized user except myself. The screen asked, "Are you sure?" As if it had doubts about my resolve. I clicked yes, steady as a heartbeat. My savings looked smaller without the illusion of shared control, but at least it was honest. I printed statements, slid them into a new folder, labeled it in clear ink, mine. I cooked a simple dinner and locked the front door after myself as though it were a ritual. When I sat down to eat, the key ring rested beside my plate. Each bite tasted sharper, brighter, like food seasoned with independence. For dessert, I ate the blueberries slowly, one by one, the sweetness lingering long after the bowl was empty. The phone rang on a Wednesday evening, just as the kettle began to whistle. I almost let it go to voicemail, but the number was familiar. Mark's house. I answered with a steady, "Hello," prepared for politeness and nothing more. Instead, it was Ruby, her voice soft and urgent. "Grandma, can I see you? Just me, please." My heart squeezed at the word please. Teenagers don't say it unless they mean it. I told her yes, and we arranged to meet at Mel's Diner, a place halfway between us where the booth smelled of coffee and syrup, and the jukebox still had songs from my youth. She was waiting in a corner booth, shoulders hunched like she was carrying secrets too heavy for her age. When she saw me, her face opened into relief. We ordered milkshakes, vanilla for her, chocolate for me, and she wrapped her hands around the glass like it might steady her. "Mom says things about you," she confessed, eyes on the straw. "Mean things. I don't think they're true, but it's hard when Dad doesn't say anything back." Her words fell like stones in water, ripples spreading between us. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let her see that truth could float even when it hurt. "I just want to know you without all the noise," Ruby said finally. "Is that okay?" I reached across the table and touched her hand. "That's more than okay," I told her, "but it has to be honest. No carrying messages for anyone. No repeating our talks unless you want to." She nodded. Serious as a vow. A little of the weight lifted from her shoulders, and I felt something stir in me too, an ember of belonging that hadn't gone out after all. We lingered over the milkshakes, trading small stories. She asked about my garden. I asked about her sketchbook. When we parted, she hugged me fiercely. For the first time in months. I drove home with a smile that didn't need rehearsing. The house greeted me with silence, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like a promise. A week later, Mark invited me to dinner. His voice on the phone carried that strained brightness people use when they're patching cracks in a wall. I accepted because avoidance had never repaired anything. When I arrived, Lydia was already setting the table, her nails tapping against the plates like a countdown. The meal was roast chicken, potatoes, green beans, all smelling of tradition. Ruby sat quietly, eyes darting between us. Conversation skipped like a scratched record until Lydia leaned forward, her smile sharp. "Elaine, we've been thinking it might be best if you put Mark back on your power of attorney. Just in case something happens, it would make everything so much easier." I looked at her across the candles. Mark said nothing, only speared a potato as though silence were his chosen side dish. I folded my napkin slowly, letting the moment breathe. "No," I said. My voice was calm. A stone dropped in still water. "I've already made other arrangements." Lydia's smile faltered, then returned with more sugar than before. "You don't understand. Families need to plan ahead." "I understand perfectly," I replied. "What I won't do is sign myself invisible." The air thickened. Even the green beans seemed to hold their breath. Ruby glanced at me, eyes wide, then back to her plate. Mark finally spoke. "Mom, maybe we can talk about it later." "There's nothing to talk about," I told him, steady as a ledger. "I'm not erasing you. I'm choosing myself." For a heartbeat, the table was a courtroom. My words were the gavel, and no one could object. Dinner limped along after that, flavorless despite the herbs. I sipped water, chewed slowly, and thought of how dignity tastes sharper than any spice. When dessert came, store-bought pie. Too sweet, I declined. I didn't need it. I had taken my portion already, the kind you don't find in a bakery. When I left, Ruby hugged me at the door, quick and tight. Lydia stayed behind, arms crossed. Mark's hand twitched as if he might reach out but didn't. The night air was cool on my face as I walked to my car, free in ways they couldn't yet measure. 2 months later, I sat in a lawyer's office where the air smelled faintly of leather and old coffee. The desk between us was crowded with papers, each one a key turning in a lock I had once left open. My attorney, a patient man named Harris, explained every clause in the living trust as though he were laying stones in a path. I listened carefully, nodding, initials landing on the margins like footsteps that could not be erased. The trust was simple. My home would be sold upon my passing, and the proceeds would go entirely to Haven Shelter, a local refuge for women rebuilding their lives. No loopholes, no shadows, clean lines, firm boundaries. Harris looked at me after the final signature. "Are you certain?" he asked. "Families sometimes." "I'm certain," I said. "My family already made their choice. This is mine." Ruby sat beside me as witness, her pen trembling but her smile steady. She'd insisted on coming, and I let her. The ink on the page caught the light, dark and final. I felt lighter than I had in years, as if a chain had slipped quietly to the floor. When we left, the late afternoon sun painted long stripes across the sidewalk. Ruby slipped her hand into mine. "Grandma," she whispered, "you're the bravest person I know." The words nearly undid me. I squeezed her hand, hoping she could feel the gratitude pulsing in my veins. Back at my house, I opened a closet and pulled out a framed painting Frank had done decades ago, a chessboard mid-game. He used to say life was all about the moves you made after you thought you'd already lost. I hung it in the living room, front and center. The Black Queen stood ready, not cornered, not finished. I stared at it and thought, I'm not finished either. That night, I brewed tea and sat beneath the painting. The house was quiet, but it felt like applause. Every sip tasted like a beginning rather than an ending, and for the first time in years, I believed the board was mine to play. A month later, I packed boxes not with sorrow but with decision. The house, with all its echoes, had done its duty. I chose a senior apartment complex near the library and grocery store, a place where the hallways smelled of coffee in the morning and someone always held the elevator door. Downsizing felt less like shrinking and more like pruning, a way to help the tree grow stronger. On moving day, Ruby helped carry smaller boxes, while two men from the truck hauled the heavier pieces. I directed them where to set the couch, where to leave the lamp Frank had once read beside. When the last box was gone, I walked through the empty rooms one final time. The walls held memories, but not guilt. I closed the door and locked it with a steady hand, the echo of the latch sounding like a benediction. The new apartment greeted me with sunlight splashed across hardwood floors. I placed the chessboard painting on the wall opposite the window, where the light would strike the queen every morning. My neighbors introduced themselves before the movers had even left. One brought banana bread, still warm, and I nearly wept at the ordinary kindness of it. That evening, I set a single place at the small kitchen table. The plate was plain, the napkin folded carefully, the food simple: grilled fish, a baked potato, and green beans from the farmer's market. I ate slowly, each bite savored. The silence around me no longer a void but a companion. For dessert, I opened the window and let the night air in, cool and honest. Ruby stopped by later with a mason jar of flowers. "It already feels like home," she said, looking around. I smiled, realizing she was right. The apartment wasn't large, but it was mine, claimed by choice, not by inheritance or expectation. I walked her to the door, and when she left, I lingered in the quiet, grateful for walls that echoed only with my own footsteps. The letter arrived on a Friday, tucked among bills and a glossy coupon flyer. The handwriting on the envelope stopped me in the doorway. It was Mark's, careful but uncertain, as if each stroke of the pen argued with itself. I carried it inside, set it on the kitchen counter, and stared at it while the kettle hissed. Steam rose, the apartment filling with warmth. But I stayed cold until I opened the envelope. Inside, the letter was long. Words crowded close like he was racing to confess. He wrote that he was sorry, that he had let silence become his language, that he should have defended me. He said Lydia's sharpness had worn him down, and he had gone along with it because it was easier than fighting. He wrote that he missed me, that Ruby talked about me more than ever, that he wanted to repair what he had broken. I read the first page slowly, then folded the rest. My eyes burned, but not from tears. It was the ache of a muscle long unused. I placed the letter in the top drawer of my desk. Not yet, I told it, as if it could hear. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a key you turn only when the lock is ready. Later that evening, Ruby called. "Did you get Dad's letter?" she asked softly. I told her yes. "Are you going to answer?" she pressed. I hesitated, then said, "I'll think about it." That was the truth, the only one I could give. She didn't argue. She only said, "I love you." And I felt the words steady me like a hand on my shoulder. Before bed, I slid the drawer shut and laid my keys on top. One day, perhaps, I would read the rest. But for now, it was enough to know the words existed, waiting, like a door that could open when I chose, not before. On my 73rd birthday, I set the table in my apartment with the same care I once gave to holidays that spanned 3 generations. Only this time, it was for a small circle, 2 neighbors from down the hall, a woman from the library book club, and Ruby. The table wasn't crowded, but it was complete. I laid a cloth, polished the silver, and placed the chessboard painting where everyone could see. The queen caught the evening light, gleaming like proof. Ruby arrived with a cake she had baked herself, lopsided but brave. "Happy birthday, Grandma," she said, hugging me with both arms as if she could anchor me to the world. My neighbors brought flowers, laughter, and the easy kindness of people who wanted nothing but company. The room filled with the hum of voices, forks tapping plates, stories trading hands like gifts. For once, I didn't feel like an extra at someone else's table. I was the host, the center, the reason. When it came time to cut the cake, Ruby insisted I take the first slice. I remembered the party months ago, the words that had pierced me, and I felt the echo fade. This cake, uneven and sweet, was better medicine than any apology. I looked around the table and realized no one here was calculating what I could give them. They were simply present, and so was I. After the dishes were cleared and the guests gone, I sat alone with one candle still burning. I thought of Mark's letter waiting in the drawer, of Lydia's silence, of the door I hadn't closed entirely. Maybe one day I would open it again, but not tonight. Tonight, the only door I cared about was the one I had unlocked for myself. I leaned back, watching the flame flicker. They had once asked why I was still alive. Here was my answer: to set my own table, to choose my own company, and to know that being alive is reason enough. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.